Knuckles mentioned you in their story. Ooh, we're doing a podcast.
Yay.
Good morning, Knuckles. I mean, good afternoon, of course.
I,
How
I
are you?
don't know why we do this every time.
What? How are you? Yeah, I know we've been talking for half an hour.
We've been talking for longer than half an hour now.
You alright?
Yeah, not bad. How are you 3 days into Untrainable now? Officially
Oh,
halfway through the week.
10 seconds into the app. Should we plug the program? Yeah. No, I have jumped on our program, Un-Trainable. 3 days complete, 2 strength days, 1 cardio. It's going well. Really enjoying it. It's nice to. Obviously, I said this to someone the other day. It's quite strange because even though I planned it. We wrote it together, and like fairly recently too. It still feels like I don't have to think about my training. It's nice to have it because normally I plan it on like a weekly basis. I go week to week, program it for myself if I don't have a coach at a given point, which I don't. But yeah, it's been
For
great.
you,
Haven't trained.
I was gonna say for you specifically, do you find like you're easily able to fit it in between clients and stuff?
Yeah, it's been really efficient actually. The other day, day two. So a little spoiler, a glimpse into the program. Day two is a fitness day, but on both of the fitness days that are currently being programmed in the week, we put in optional like accessory movements for the people who are doing it gym based. So we program a run, but for the people who aren't runners or don't want to run, we program alongside that a gym based conditioning session. For those guys, we put in optional accessory movements. So there's a bit of extra like lifting, and I did that. It took me like 12 minutes to do the lifts, and then I did my cardio piece, which took like 15 minutes because I personally am training for a very hilly marathon later in the year, so I tweaked the session a little bit to be incline treadmill intervals. I was done. It took me like half an hour, and it all felt extremely productive. Yeah, I should probably say the reason we do it like that, we do the optional accessories, is because the strength training side of things is quite minimally dosed. So those sessions aren't like jam packed. It's just like meat and potatoes, the good stuff. It's what you need, and no fluff outside of that. So yeah,
Yeah, I think,
loving
and
it.
also an important point is probably what you said, how you tweaked it specifically because you're preparing for an event. I feel like that's one of the nice things about the program is that it also allows members the freedom um, to change exercises based on what they have access to. Like we have members of the group who'll message us saying they're missing a piece of kit and ask us if there's an option or an alternative exercise that they can do that gives them the same benefit or stimulus. So that freedom is quite useful.
Yeah, yeah, good. Anyway, let's shut up about that. Unplanned segue. Actually, we didn't really plan on launching into that, but you may have gleaned from that Untrainable is a program that deals with development of multiple physical qualities, two of which being strength, the strength training side of things, and cardio. Today's episode is about the interference effect. Let's explain what that is, and by let's explain, I mean Knuckles, Dr. Knuckles. Can you explain what that is, please? Or what it isn't?
So it's a hypothesized interference effect or an interference effect theory, which basically is comprised of two parts. One, the idea that adding cardio to your training might result in too much volume, leading to overreaching and overtraining and inadequate recovery. But the more talked about component is this idea that the adaptations from well, not the adaptations, rather the stimulus from the cardio work will interfere with the stimulus from strength training, thereby having a negative or limiting effect on the adaptations that you can make from strength training, whether it's in terms of actual muscular strength or muscle hypertrophy.
Yeah, it's a bit of fear mongering, I suppose. The people who kind of talk about the interference effect as though it is a real thing always kind of come at it from the angle of, oh, be careful, don't do these two things at once. It's not going to work out well for you. So immediately my gut reaction is, I don't like that, you utter wimp. Um, so yeah, I get my back up a little bit. But from I can come at this from lots of different perspectives, having looked at the research. But from a personal perspective, I I haven't trained both these modalities like extremely hard at the same time for that long. I started running 3 years ago alongside my strength work, and before that, I did I did some fitness. Like we've done plenty of like conditioning sessions together, but I wouldn't say it was always a staple in my training. But having integrated running and fitness alongside my strength work for the last 3 years, I have not noticed the existence of an interference effect. If anything, it's been the best 3 years of training of my life.
So I'm just going to drop something in there, and like feel free to jump in if you disagree. I'm not going to say the interference effect isn't a thing. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. All I'm going to say is it can happen, but it doesn't have to happen. It's the same thing as, does heavy strength training cause injuries? It can cause injury, but also it doesn't have to, because you could do a 45-minute weight training session now, like really high intensity, push yourself till you've got absolutely nothing left in the tank, and then go straight into running a half marathon. I'd argue that there would be a little interference there, that the fatigue from the running would interfere with your efficiency, or the fatigue from the lifting would interfere with the efficiency of your run, and the running would interfere with the recovery from the lifting. So interference effect can happen, but if you're sensible with the way you approach training, it doesn't have to happen.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that, but I think it's the language
Yeah.
that's important. Like you're saying, it's an interference effect. Like there's literally they can interfere with each other, by which they can affect each other a little bit, and of course they can. I think, but the proposed the interference effect, the way people talk about it, it is literally that the mechanisms of recovering or adapting from strength training and the mechanisms for recovering from and adapting to cardio like clash somehow, and they talk to each other and they don't like doing it at the same
Mm.
time. And like I just don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't think that exists. I personally,
So, like you said, I think language is important. I think most of the time when you need to be a little wary when absolutist claims are made, where someone says there is an interference effect, or there will be an interference effect, or that it will affect the gains that you make. That should raise a red flag straight away, because anything science related, it's always can and might. It can't be an
yeah,
absolute statement. And the idea that because the two deliver a different stimulus, they would interfere the adaptations, well, then that would put in the bin the idea that we can simultaneously develop multiple qualities even within the gym. Or if that is really the case, then explain to me how rugby players are absolute units, like incredibly strong, and also have a gas
there
tank
is
on
no,
them.
there is an explanation, but we can't talk about it.
So no, it's definitely something that can happen, but it is also something that, like, the odds of it happening, I think, are negligible. And
Yeah,
they are, I will mention that they are context dependent.
yeah. I'm going to do something now that I haven't done yet in the history of the podcast, but I'm going to invite you to talk a little bit about the research on the matter. Is there a particular piece you'd like to throw out at us?
Um, so there's a
You know what
few
I'm digging
there's
for.
a few meta-analyses, like several meta-analyses that I've looked at. I've examined this interference effect, or if there even is if there even is such an effect. So what the current research tells us is the strength gains that you make from strength training alone versus a combination of strength training and cardio are similar. There is no significant difference. In terms of hypertrophy, again, there is no significant difference in terms of the hypertrophic gains or the increases in muscle size that you can make. There was a meta-analysis that came out in, if I'm right, it was 2022, that said when running is the modality of cardio, it can attenuate type 1 fiber muscle hypertrophy. Again, the effect size was very small, so you could even say it was significant, but very small effect size, so it doesn't really have an impact. And it's important, I think, for the listeners to understand, like if you're worried about muscle hypertrophy, type 2 fibers are the ones that we're more concerned about because your type 2 muscle fibers have much more hypertrophic potential than the type 1. So this paper also added that although it might type 1 muscle fiber hypertrophy, it has no significant negative effect on overall muscle hypertrophy. And
which is great news.
um, like just for the listeners, I'll leave this to you. Can you tell them why it's important that we're mentioning meta-analyses and not individual studies?
Yeah, to keep it quite simple, a meta-analysis looks at the available body of research, or at least a very large chunk of it, and it basically compiles all the findings and summarizes them in a nice way. Because individual studies are almost meaningless in a vast body of science, and we should never look at individual like randomized controlled trials and things like that and look at the result. It looked at 10 rats and then make a training decision off the back of it. Like you can use it to kind of guide you a little bit, but the kind of the gold standard of reading research and kind of hopefully using it to dictate your practice a little bit will be meta-analyses and systematic reviews, which are, to my mind, are pretty similar.
Yeah, and there's just a different layer of
Yeah,
analysis that's added to one of them. But I think what Tom says is true in the sense that you can't just look at one intervention study and then draw conclusions to change everything that you do. But this is not,
you could find and you could find something that would agree with any
yeah,
bias, which is the problem, isn't
yeah.
it? There are lots of studies because some individual pieces of research are better than others. Some are entered into with differing levels of bias and different sources of funding and things like that. So it's important to look at the whole lot.
And also,
And the best way to do that is not to look at every piece of research yourself, it's to look at people who know what they're doing, who have looked at every piece of research themselves.
and the advantage of a meta-analysis is that when they're discussing stuff, like they try to normalize the findings, so to put everything on a level playing ground. So, just as an example of one intervention study, Tom and I were discussing one earlier, where they had three experimental groups. You had one group doing strength training, you had one group doing the endurance training, and you had the third group that was doing your strength training and endurance training. So, on the surface, it might seem like a logical approach. So, you got two groups doing one modality each, and then your third group is doing the combined training. But then you should start to understand that if only one group is doing the combined training, they're doing a lot more, potentially double the volume of work that the other two groups are doing. And so you can't really compare the effects or the results from those studies because unless they normalize it for the volume of work being done, which is what a lot of these meta-analyses do. They try to put everyone on a level playing ground by normalizing some of the contributing factors.
Yeah, so that's a good example actually of what we were saying. So that piece of research found that there was definitely an interference effect, and it was a bad thing that we should all be avoiding. But then there's plenty of other pieces of research that completely contradict it. So you know, they're all applying a scientific process. So why are they finding totally different things? And it's just because the methodology of a particular piece of research perhaps wasn't as watertight as they thought.
Which is also last
Yeah,
comment about meta-analyses, and then we need to move on. And the
yeah,
nice thing
yeah,
about
yeah, yeah. I'm going to delete
meta-analyses,
this anyway.
the nice thing about meta-analyses is when they explain why their findings are different to some of the studies included within the study, or when they touch upon or highlight that the findings are different, they also go into explaining why. So the reader also gets an understanding of, okay, so this is what drove the results from those studies in a certain direction. So it does give you a good understanding of why some of them found what they found.
Yeah, Yeah, don't get me wrong, they're still incredibly difficult to read. Like the language used and things like that is dense stuff. But yeah, far far easier. Anyway, that last study you mentioned with the three groups, I think quite nicely, but inadvertently, they have uncovered perhaps the true culprit behind a potential perceived interference effect, which is the training volume. These guys in that middle group were doing double the amount, and so of course they weren't going to recover from it. They were doing a strength training program and an endurance training program, not a kind of a hybrid blend of a strength endurance program. So it comes back to, I think, what you said at the beginning of the episode. Perhaps there is an interference effect, but there doesn't have to be. It's more about how you're doing it. What does your program look like? You can't just run two side by side and expect to get the best of both worlds. So yeah, let's go. What would your advice be to people who perhaps you've got a endurance athlete, a runner, or a cyclist, or a triathlete, or something who wants to add strength training, or the inverse, you've got a person who's an intermediate to advanced lifter, loves strength training, but they'd like to start incorporating cardio. There is a threshold of an amount of work that these guys will need to do on both angles. What's the bare minimum of both of those things that they should be aiming for?
For me, I think we touched upon, I think in episode one, the bare minimum in terms of strength training, what you can do to get that effect. The first thing to maybe highlight is the fact that for whoever it is, the first discussion is what the priority is. Is the priority to, so if it's an endurance runner who hasn't been doing much strength work at all, we'd probably want to get them stronger because they're already doing the running anyway. So we can maybe move the running to a minimal dose to continue to make like some kind of improvement and go a little harder on the strength training. Um, I think the minimum dose for an athlete in terms of their running or their cardiovascular work is going to be quite individual specific. It's going to depend on what they've been doing prior. From a strength training perspective, it's fairly, again, like while it is dependent on your previous history, even something as 4 sets per week, and um, the idea would be to use heavier loads and lower reps just to try and manage the fatigue that you tend to get from it.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about the priority for like an endurance runner who was weak and needed to work on strength, you definitely could reduce the amount of endurance work they were doing in favour of strength training to try and kind of accelerate that growth. But at the same time, because they were so untrained on the strength side of things, the minimum effective dose for them would be absolutely
Yeah.
minuscule. Like they wouldn't have to add much at all. Like they could do 2 half-hour sessions a
Mhm.
week, and get like 2 or 3 sets of 5 or 6 different movements, and they'd make incredible progress over a 6 month period.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
What about big heavy strength boys who've never touched cardio? I mean, there are some pretty useful government guidelines, which I think could probably scare people a little bit.
I think an easy way for someone who's never done cardio to approach it, especially for the big heavy boys, would be, I know the government guideline is 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardio. Um, don't think that all of it needs to be running, and don't think that all of it needs to be done within 1 or 2 sessions. You can spread this across a week. You can add variety, use different modalities. I know you mentioned what was the split if it was moderate intensity and high intensity?
Oh, so the guideline is either 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity cardio activity or 75 minutes of vigorous cardio activity. And then obviously you can kind of mix and match those. Yeah, just one has a higher weighting because it's more intense.
I would almost say that a nice place to start would be one 30 to 40 minute, like just a zone two. So an RP of 4 or 5, whether it's a
Yeah.
run, cycle, row, whatever modality you choose, there is no right or wrong. And then maybe one interval based cardio session. So something a little more high intensity, whether it's using work to rest ratios of 1 to 1, or do you want to go a little more into sprint intervals and you're using ratios of, say, 1:10?
Yeah, or 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think coverage of different intensities when it comes to cardio is quite important. So some low to moderate and some moderate to high would be just fine coverage for someone who's just getting started. Those government guidelines, 150 minutes of moderate, 75 of vigorous, I think they should be your target. I think people should be obtaining that. There's plenty of research to demonstrate like how much health gains there are for hitting that amount of cardio in your life. Like the common one that gets tossed around is like it could add up to 7 years to your life, and then that doesn't even touch on like the number of, call it health span, the number of like quality years you'll have, rather than being completely decrepit in older age. You'll be able to do some fun stuff as well. That, yeah, they should be your goal, but that's not to say that you should stop doing absolutely nothing and start doing that amount of cardio immediately, because it'd be a lot for your system to cope with and to recover from. So, like Knuckles said, go in low. Like if you're starting at nothing, it's a bit like the endurance guys who haven't done any strength training. They're going to get a really good effect off of a small dose of strength. It's the same for you. Like start doing a little bit of cardio, you're going to see some progress, and then build on that. And obviously, the cap is how much time have you got available to commit to this stuff. In my opinion, you should be maxing out that cap.
Yeah.
It'll be different for everyone based on, you know, work and lifestyle and family and things like that. But yeah,
I know this is something we said we'll touch upon a little further into this episode, but since you did mention what it does for them in terms of health, what's your take on what seems to be doing rounds these days is the idea that strength training is enough to improve your cardiovascular health?
yeah, you see it every now and again, don't you? Certain Instagram personalities. Well, there was a piece of research recently, wasn't
Yeah.
there? This many squats or
I think
something is
they were
just
doing
as good as
10 reps in the squat.
10 reps of squats. Oh, it's bollocks. Like, of course, I think getting stronger and strength training can improve your like execution of certain things that are cardiovascularly based activities. Like you'll become a better runner by getting stronger, but the the things it's improving, the physical qualities that are improving between strength training and cardio are totally different. So I don't know I don't know why we're trying to convince people to not do one and just do the other. I don't even know how the people who are saying this are benefiting. Do they really believe it? I'm not sure.
So this is the funny thing. So the personality, Instagram personality who touched upon the study and then said, if you can't do cardio and you're still doing a strength training, it'll be enough. It's a funny conclusion to come to when the actual authors of the study themselves said that although they noticed that heart rate was high, it was not it is not cardio because the demands are very different. A very simple way to distinguish it is weight training, strength training, resistance training, whatever you want to call it, are high intensity contractions for a short duration of time with rest between. So even if you're doing 10 sets of
Yeah,
squats, how I'm not 10 sets, 10 reps on squats, how long do you think that would take you? A set of 10 reps, how long would that take you?
25, 30
And
seconds,
then you'd rest about 2 to 3
40 maybe.
minutes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And now cardio is about moderate intensity contractions sustained over a longer period of time. So if you're talking about a zone two, for example, a zone two bike ride, you're cycling at moderate intensity muscle contractions for 40 minutes. The demand is completely different. The stimulus you deliver is
yeah,
completely different. And it's quite a, going back to what Tom and I talked about earlier in the episode about single studies and meta-analyses. So this was a single study that came out, but we have like numerous meta-analyses that have consistently reported that the cardiovascular gains that you make from cardio or from doing your endurance work are far superior to any cardiovascular adaptations that you make from strength training. And then more recently, a paper came out. They were specifically examining the effects of training on cardiometabolic and all-cause mortality. And the finding from this meta-analysis was that the combination of the two actually delivers a more potent stimulus to reduce cardiometabolic and all-cause mortality compared to either modality on its own. So I don't know why it's still a discussion people have about one or the other.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I get like I could almost understand the layperson believing that it would have a significant impact on cardio fitness because sometimes it feels like it.
Yeah, like
Like, doing a, I don't know, if you were doing, especially like single leg work, set of reverse lunges, 10 of those each leg it's disgusting. I count myself as a pretty fit dude, but I still get to the end of that set and I'm absolutely gasping. And I think it's a combination of things, isn't it? It's the restriction in your ability to breathe because you're bracing up your core, your diaphragm can't move as much, your rib cage can't move as much because you're so tense to lift a high weight. And then yeah, of course there is some taxation on your body's ability to deliver oxygen to these muscles because they're still working. So yeah, your heart rate is going to get elevated and your breathing rate is going to get elevated. But yeah, I think we've covered it. It just doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting fitter. Maybe a little bit, but not in the same way.
yeah, it's a different stimulus, so it's a different adaptation. That's all it is.
Yeah. Talking about the relationship between, one benefit and the other, and I guess how we can organize our strength training to improve our ability to run, cycle, swim, long distances, whatever. I see a lot of runners and even people who coach runners talking about lifting in the gym but only using high reps. And by high reps I mean like maybe 15 plus reps in a set. And the word that always gets tossed around is the physical quality that they are training is muscular endurance. Got any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's most commonly referred to either muscular endurance or strength endurance, and then that 15 plus rep range is considered to be the ideal zone to be training it. Strength endurance, I want to say endurance is a myth, but it's not necessarily a myth. But what is important to understand that you build endurance or muscular endurance specific to the task that you train it in. So if you think doing sets of 15 on squats is going to build muscular endurance that transfers to running, you are you might be mistaken. Because there is research out there that shows that you build muscular endurance by doing the specific tasks. So do more of the specific tasks that you're trying to build that muscular endurance in. There's a couple of studies that I've looked at it in rowers and things like that. So remember in the gym to train that general quality. So we're trying to get stronger in the gym. The idea is that when you're lifting heavy weights with lower reps, you improve the body's ability to produce force. In a running context now, it just means that you can now produce that force at a lower energy expenditure. And then you need to do more of the actual running to build that muscular endurance.
We always come back to it, don't we, when we're talking about strength for sport or just any kind of resistance training and linking it into sport. It's the general qualities that we're trying to build here. It's not specific things or specific movements or specific rep ranges. Yeah, and whilst I think we've spoken a little bit about muscle growth before, like some of these endurance athletes would benefit from a little holding a little bit more muscle tissue, and you of course can build muscle tissue in those rep ranges, but I think strength is a more assistive quality for endurance than muscle growth is. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but I also feel it's a funny one because I feel like there's always this idea amongst runners that if they lift heavy, they'll get bulky, that they get heavier and slow down.
Yeah.
But we actually know that the neural adaptations are much greater when you're using heavier training loads, and you can train further away from failure and get that benefit. And we know For to stimulate muscle growth, we need to be taking our sets closer to failure. So you can lift heavy,
Yeah.
stay further away from failure, minimize the amount of fatigue, and improve your running performance.
Yeah. Get strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite ironic, actually. What they're trying to do is get strong without getting big by lifting light weights with high rep ranges. But actually, what they're doing is they're not getting strong at all because the loads are too light, but they are still probably putting on muscle tissue,
Yeah.
which is still a good
Yeah.
thing. They think it's a bad thing. Yes. I think this roughly ties into another thing we wanted to talk about as well, which was strength training or movements in the gym resembling the movement patterns in your sport. And like I know we keep talking about running and cycling, but we'll keep doing that because we're talking about endurance. But you do see a lot of coaches like really trying to mirror these movements. Like runners all have to do like step ups from a specific height, and they have this like knee drive coming through. I'll put a video up if I can find one because it looks like running. Like you, I know you've got opinions on this, but
It blows my mind because we've talked about this specific exercise so much before, like trying to work out what the logic is. So I know Tom said he put up a video. It was basically it's a barbell step up. So you got the barbell on your back, you step onto the box with your lead leg, but for some reason the trail leg is then brought up and the knee you drive like almost into a high knee drive, which makes absolutely no sense to me because to go into that high knee drive, yes, you're going to use the hip flexor from the trail leg, but it's moving against absolutely no resistance. So I don't know what adaptation you're trying to get because it's as good as just standing on level ground and just lifting your knee up. And I would almost say
yeah,
that driving that knee up once you stepped onto the box, if you've got a heavy weight on your back, I reckon that's going to make you a little bit unstable. So I just don't see the point of it. If you want to train the hip flexors, isolate them and load them in another movement. Don't try to
train here. Yeah.
like it becomes
Well, nothing's happening, right? It's an unweighted leg,
yeah,
and it's just
there is
yeah,
absolutely no load, no resistance on it. You're just doing you could literally do a knee raise standing on the ground now and get the exact same stimulus that you would get from that, which is nothing.
I actually asked a coach about this recently because I saw she had it planned, and brand new coach, and I really rate her more than many of the experienced coaches I know. But she planned this session for a bunch of runners and had this movement in, and it was written down as step up, which is fine, great movement, step up with the leg drive. And she asked me to look at the session. I said, why? Because I didn't
Yeah.
understand why people do it. I still don't. I said, why is it with the leg drive? And she said, oh, actually, good point. I don't know. I've just seen people do it, and I think there's tons of that. We're all susceptible to that sort of thing. I'm sure there's tons of stuff that we do that is just like we've accepted as gospel. I wouldn't know exactly what, but there must be some stuff. That's just one that's struck me as odd in the past, and yeah, she didn't know. I don't know if she still did it or not. I may have taken it out.
So one of
Um,
my mentors, and like I feel like that's really stuck with me. And even when like I'm working with younger coaches, it's the first thing I'll tell them. And what he drilled into us was this idea that when you look at a program or your program and you're looking through everything in it, if you can't think of a reason for something being in that program, it probably shouldn't be in there.
yeah,
So this idea of
at the very least, you don't know why it's there. Like there might be a good reason to have it, but you don't know
yeah,
it, and you plan the
exactly. So
program,
then
so you
it
should
shouldn't.
know it. You should understand it.
Exactly. So when someone asks me, and like it really annoys me when people send me something a coach is doing and ask me, "Oh, why do you think they're doing that?" Now, if it's something that I don't agree with, I can tell you why I don't think it makes sense, but I can't tell you why another coach is doing it because I didn't put the exercise in their program. I don't know what their thought process
Yeah,
is.
I get those questions too. I've changed the way I answer them a little bit because obviously when I was a young fiery lad, I would be like, well, I'll tell you why it's in there. They're an idiot. That's why. Um,
So you just say the same thing now, but like the
and then
delivery is
yeah,
better.
no, 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 no. Yeah, the delivery is better. I'm sure there's people doing that to my programs too out there somewhere. Um, but now it's more like, look, I don't know. Hopefully they've got a reason, or I'm sure they have a reason for it being there. I don't know what it would
Yeah.
be. And the implication there is that, I've been coaching a while now. If there was a fucking reason, I would know why. And if they take that from the conversation, that's fine. But otherwise, I won't shit on the other coach too hard.
But yeah, so coming
Yeah,
back to Tom's question was about does the training
have
and
we answered that? No.
I mean that's when we went into your barbell step up
Yeah,
with the knee drive. But yeah, the answer is simple now. Your training doesn't need to mimic or resemble the movements that you see in running. Think about the qualities that you want to train, and you can choose any exercise you want to develop those qualities, and
yeah,
then the transfer to running comes from doing more running.
yeah. It's probably important to note that we're not saying they shouldn't look alike because some of that stuff will. Like I said, step ups are a great exercise. Like you could argue that lunging looks a little bit like running because you go into that kind of split stance. There's a lead leg, trail leg, and then you step through. But that's not the reason we're doing it. We're not doing it because it looks like
Yeah,
running. It looks a tiny bit like running because you're still a human being with two legs and you're moving.
yeah, like
Uh,
cable hip flexor marches as well. Like we do hip flexor marches, we do get
yeah,
you driving your knee up, but we do it with resistance because that's what gets
yeah,
adaptation. So there's a like you do it, and like it's like say we talk about I don't know a high jumper, and their program has a lot of plyometrics and loaded jumps. That's another example where it happens to resemble what they do in the sport, but that's also the modality we use to train the quality that underpins what they do in their sport.
yeah, absolutely. Let's tie it back into a, a program containing both of these modalities. When someone is thinking about their training and organizing it, are there certain things they need to think about when they are planning it? And the things that jump out to me might be things like organizing your week in a certain sequence, putting space between sessions. Are there like real priorities for you?
Yeah, I think sequencing is quite an important one for me. Knowing where your moderate intensity, high volume runs or cardio or endurance work is sitting and where your high intensity interval work is sitting, because based on that, we also know that certain metrics can temporarily be a little lower. So after a long run, high volume, moderate intensity run, your power output is a little, I won't say impaired, but the amount of power you can generate is lower than usual for a little while. So just being aware of that lets you plan what you actually do in your subsequent strength training session, giving yourself time for the other qualities to recover before you actually go into the gym to train them.
Yeah, planning your week in
Yeah,
a certain order. And I think it's definitely, there's a massive individual factor here.
100%.
Like people
Yeah,
experience these things slightly differently. So it's probably important to do a little bit of trial and error yourself. And like I certainly would do that with clients too. Like we can have a good educated stab in the dark as to how a week should be laid out. But at the end of the day, we have to wait for the feedback at the end of that week or at the end of several weeks, see if we're happy with it. And if not, make a little tweak. You're always okay to
yeah, or even
move
something
things
as
around,
simple
right?
as like what I'll do with some of my clients if I know they've done a long run, when they have to lift, I'll just drop them a message before and ask them how they're feeling. And then if they're feeling absolutely fresh and well recovered, I'll just say, okay, then we carry on with a regular session. And then if they say they're feeling a little bit fatigued, I'll just say, okay, so we'll still get in the strength work. We'll just drop the volume down. We go heavy, minimal reps, and just still get that stimulus in and very short, quick session.
Yeah, exactly. And even that's very high level of service from yourself, by the way. Even the message I know is probably not required because I know that your messaging, like mine, is heavy on the
Yeah.
auto-regulation side of things, and I know that your clients will know to sort of check in with
Yeah.
themselves when they arrive at the gym, and how they're feeling, and have a think about what they've done the past 24, 48 hours and how it could affect things moving forwards. And then, yeah, they're, educated enough to make their own on the day training decisions around the loads that they're lifting. And obviously, the prescription won't change. You'll, certain number of sets, certain number of reps at a certain intensity. It will just be what that intensity is on the day. The load will change to hit the same one. So you
It's
might be
yeah,
really, really tired. A 2 reps in reserve might be lighter than it was last week because you did a giant run yesterday.
which is the advantage of using things like reps in reserve for intensities because it's relative to how you feel on the day.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about was I know there are a few who are now open to it, which is this idea of doing both on the same day. And I know you've done it a couple of times where you lifted in the morning and then gone for a run in the evening. So what's your advice for someone who's doing both on the same day?
Uh, it comes obviously it comes down to scheduling. If your week pans out like that, you just firstly and most importantly, you just got to do it, right? It's not usually that much fun to cram that much work into a single day, but you just got to do it. I think in an ideal scenario, what you'll do is, personally, I would lift first, but again, I think there's massive individual factors there depending on what you prefer. Ideally, you will separate those sessions by at least a couple of hours, and preferably get some food and refuel in the interim. But yeah, other than that, you just got to do it. Like the second session of the day, you might just have to tweak it slightly, hold back a little bit because the energy may not be there. And like Knuckles said, there's certain physical qualities that will take a hit when you do have to cram work quite close together, different types of work close together. But yeah, even one of the common things I hear quite a long time, and it's quite often, not just doing work on the same day, but when it comes to running a program that has lifting and usually for me running in it, is they, even if it's subsequent days, one day after the other, they do have an impact on each other in terms of performance, and maybe even if it's not in terms of performance, it's in terms of how it feels. For example, you might be sore from lifting for your run the following day. And I think you can go into things like scheduling and trying to make sure that the things that make you sore aren't the day before an important run, or even you can look at things like exercise variability and the number of times in a program you change exercises, because that tends to be the thing that makes you the most sore. You can look at really minimizing that and being consistent with your exercise choices. But I personally, I don't care that much. I just want people to do the work. There's no reason you can't run on sore or tired or heavy legs. It sucks a bit more, but I think there's, I don't know if bravery is the right word, but there's pride that you can take in that, because this is a bit David Goggins, and I don't like going down this route too often, but you should do the things that other people don't want to do, or that they won't do. Like, if think about your mates. Would they, if they were on sore legs today from yesterday, would they still go for their run? And the answer is probably no. So you should goddamn do it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think the more important thing in this context would be to go there so you still have that consistency. And we've touched upon it in episode one, how this consistency is probably one of the most important things. And just go. The quality of work will be relative to how you're feeling on the day, but just get it done.
Yeah, I think it's important to say we are not talking to professional athletes here. If we were, then there might be an issue, and like optimal performance at every training session might be a priority. But without insulting anyone, that ain't you, and it ain't me either. But like, we're not that worried about perfection. We're just showing up.
Yeah, yeah, very fair.
Yeah, super Gogginsy, right?
You need to, what's the thing he says? Who's going to carry the boats? That's what we need to add in here.
Who's going to carry the kayaks? I think, yeah. Yeah. Should we next episode? Should we do it? But I'll be out on a run and I'll just be filming on my phone or something.
Suboptimal, but yeah, yeah.
Suboptimal for audio quality. Yeah. Yeah. Super motivating, and we'll get some sick clips out of it.
Yeah, like you've seen some of these influencers who do this thing while they're running, saying, "I don't drink, I don't go out, I don't do this, I don't do that," and
Yeah.
we,
Shut up.
we yeah,
I
we'll be
drink and I do what you're doing.
yeah. For all the YouTube, all of you are watching the video on YouTube, you'll notice how Tom's wine rack is looking a little empty now. He's been a busy
Right.
boy.
How many weeks have we been doing this? There's been 3 bottles up there for the duration. Now there's 2. Guess where it is? It's in the fridge. That's it. It's in the fridge. My wife put it in the fridge. Sorry. Well, I think we've covered off most of the topics, the talking points that we wanted to cover off there. Can we sum it up a little bit?
Do your cardio. Lift heavy, do your
Yeah,
cardio, recover. It is
yeah,
that simple. Um,
yeah.
if you want to add one more or two more to it, I'd say for the recovery part is just if you're an endurance athlete who's adding strength training, or if you're someone who lifts who's adding endurance work, nutrition is important. You're going to be expending a lot more calories, so make sure you fuel up so that you recover and just get enough sleep.
Big topic, that one. That's probably worth an episode at some point. Fueling.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Until then, if you are struggling for knowing what to do in a training program that combines both cardio and strength training, take a look at Un-Trainable. We got a 7-day free trial. Costs you absolutely nothing. If you love it, you can stay on, and it is less than £1 a day, or in Knuckles units,
It's just about 100 rupees.
100 rupees, less than 100 rupees. Very nice.
Just about.
Thank you for
Yeah.
tuning in, guys. Obviously, we talked about a lot of stuff today. We expect that people will have questions on it or things that perhaps we haven't explained to 100%. If you do have them, drop them in the comments or send us a DM over on Instagram. I'll flash up our at whatever it is in a bit. But yeah, until then, good chat, Knuckles.
Good chat.
See you on the next one.